Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very important Troop Talk Live. We are talking about the Scouts BSA clothing guidelines. We're going to get all into it. Before we do that, welcome to the show, one of our favorites ever, Angelique, who's the chair of the Scouts BSA committee. Hey, Angelique.
Hey, Gina.
How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. A lot of storms where I'm at, but hopefully I will stay live the whole time.
Yes, Aaron and I have been complaining about dust storms on every single live video we've done recently. You can hear it in our voices as we are talking on these. And Angelique has just gotten back from a whirlwind. She's in the middle of some whirlwind travels, but she has made some time to talk with us today about something, I don't know, I think it's kind of exciting. It's just really cool to have the Scouts BSA clothing guidelines, how that works, how that's different than a policy and who makes a policy and all that. We're going to get into this all quite a bit more, but really, Angelique, I think we should start with where this all started. Where did we get info? Why are we even talking about this?
Sure. So we did some research. It was the 5-year review of girls in Scouts BSA, and it went out to all of the girls that are currently registered in the Scouts BSA program, plus a large selection of boys, young men too, so that we would get a nice view of all the kids and their current experience in the Scouts BSA program. So this came directly out of that. We asked all kinds of questions, including things about our clothing policy as it currently stands.
Yeah, I think that's very important. We did this. I love that it included both boys and girls. And, it is important. We're all experiencing things differently. I can't speak to a young man's perspective growing up, but I have a little bit of insight in what it's like to be growing up as a girl. So it's really eye-opening to kind of see some of this feedback. So what were some of the topics that we asked them about? And then how did dress code come in?
So we asked them about the Scouting America clothing policy, which for full disclosure, is very brief. It, up to this point, has said wear what's appropriate for the activity. That's all it said. And so based on that, we asked the Scouts if they thought that it was fair or not. And then we asked them to give some examples of when they were told that their clothing was inappropriate. So we got some really interesting responses from that. So I have on screen, if Brian wants to put them, a typical girls' troop response was shown on screen. Within my first week of scouting, I was told by an adult male in front of a group that my Class A shirt was too tight. Another example was they were told that the dress code was not equally enforced for boys and girls. They were told to cover up while they were wearing a tank top, while boys were wearing open face. I think that means with their shirt open, and no one said a thing. Comments like, I've been called out for wearing inappropriate pants, and they were the Scout pants that were bought at the Scout store. And girls who were told that their swimsuit was inappropriate, and they couldn't find anything in the literature that said that their two-piece tankini was appropriate or not. So those were very, very typical of the thousands and thousands and thousands of comments that we got from girls. Now I want to show you next what are some of the typical responses we got from boys. I got called out for the wrong socks, or I was missing my Scout socks, or I didn't have my shirt tucked in, or I needed to tuck in my shirt. So those were very, very, very common examples, hundreds and hundreds of what boys were told over and over again. So there's some disparity there about where what's appropriate. The girls were being told very strongly different messaging about what was appropriate and what was not appropriate from their body. And they were getting lots of conflicting messages from adults. So we sought to take this feedback and figure out, how can we make this better? How can we make sure that Scouts feel that they have a solid, concrete answer about what's okay and what's not okay to wear in scouting? So that's where this started to come and be developed.
Really fascinating to compare and contrast that feedback that Boy Scouts or Scouts who are boys and Scouts who are girls are sharing on what they, had heard from their leaders. I don't want to say it's triggering, but it is almost a little bit triggering to me, because I'm thinking about the first time I went to Jamboree and being explained like what I needed to wear there, and just it like kind of ooged me out, the whole thing. So it's just very interesting to see, how this is manifesting with kids. It also makes me think like there are just cultural things, I think, that are ingrained in us and we don't think about. Because I can think of my dad always telling my brother to tuck in his shirt, pull up his socks, that kind of thing. Never me. So just very interesting.
So that's exactly the concern, is that our current policy stated what's appropriate for the activity. Well, appropriate can be very different depending on the background that the person is coming from. So what is okay for one troop might not be okay for another troop. What's okay, especially the chartering organizations are very different. We have secular chartering organizations, we have religious chartering organizations, we have community chartering organizations, and everybody has very different viewpoints, and we all come from different backgrounds. So trying to figure out how to define what's okay and what's not okay is very challenging. And so there's a lot of conflict that's happening between adults, that's happening from adults to youth. So this guideline that we've created helps everyone navigate this conversation in a way that's very respectful and hopefully remove some of this ambiguity for both the parents and the scouts and the adult leaders, so that everybody knows what's supposed to happen and who has the final say.
Yes, folks were definitely looking for this. We have a lot of viewers right now. Just a reminder, if you are watching, you can tag somebody in the comments who you think might benefit from watching today's show. You can share this link after we're live. Samira says, I'm glad you're talking about this issue. As a Muslim, I've struggled to wear the uniform as an adult leader. That's why I love you emphasizing, like, we can, people are looking for the guidelines. I think that that's part of maybe the problem that we've got to fix for. And then, it can be highly, I want to say personalized, but unitalized, tailored to your unit. Samira says, I wish I could redesign the uniform. Hey, a lot of people feel like that, Samira. Just stick with us. Angelique, you said you took this data and then some smart minds got together and there was a work group. I'm assuming, I think I know it's not just people inside of Scouting, but outside of Scouting. Is that right?
Yeah, we put together a really large work group across the organization and brought in outside experts in all different areas. And we had them tackle this issue from a bunch of different viewpoints. And we worked for several months to focus in, because it's a big, hairy topic. Right? Everyone has very strong opinions and strong cultural reasons that they think something is or isn't okay. So to be able to accommodate this wide variety of everything and create this, we had to bring in all kinds of experts to try and craft something that would work for everybody. So that is exactly what happened. We brought in people from camping organizations and schools and from Scouting and from different levels of Scouting, so that we can make sure that this accommodated everybody.
Okay, so then two words have come up, appropriate and safe. And you have pointed out how appropriate is highly subjective.
Yes.
And I'm literally just stealing the words out of your mouth. We're now emphasizing safety with our guidelines, right?
Yeah, so if you look at the new guideline, and you can see it's on the Scouts BSA website, but if you look at the new clothing guidelines, what the emphasis is on safety. So all of your clothing that you wear should the emphasis should be on safety. Is it safe for the activity? And that is the question we should be asking ourselves when we're creating this policy at the troop level, which we'll talk about in a moment. So you'll see the overarching guideline is about safety, and it should make sure we should think about, does it support everybody in our troop, everybody in our unit? Is it accommodate their religious needs? Does it accommodate their physical needs, disability needs, and personal comfort level? So those are the questions we should be asking ourselves, but it all boils down to safety. Is the clothing safe for the activity?
So I just dropped a link to the URL we've been putting up on screen where you can download those Scouts BSA clothing guidelines. That really is everything you need, because it even in there has the reminder on how you formulate your troops' clothing policy. We'll get further into. But in terms of safety, can we go in there a little bit? Can you give me some examples of, like, what do we mean? How does that dictate, like, what kind of swimsuit I wear, for instance?
Sure. Yeah. So a swimsuit obviously is one of them. The swimsuit should be you should be able to wear it, and it should stay on you while you're swimming, and it should not catch in what you're doing. So it shouldn't have like dangling bits if it's going to catch and you're going down a water slide, right? It should, depending on the activity you're doing, it should make sure that you're protected from the sun. These are safety issues. Like these are the questions we should ask ourselves. Now we'll talk about what some people think appropriate means for swimsuit, right? Because people have very differing ideas of what's appropriate. That goes down a question to the troop level. But what we're focusing on is safety.
Beautiful. It's really that simple, right? Is there anything else we really need to highlight in the guidelines before we drill into more of like policy on the unit level?
The guidelines, I think, I would encourage everybody to spend some time go looking at them. It's 2 pages, and it's pretty straightforward. We will talk about in a little bit what happens when someone has a concern or a conflict, and what the adults should do if there is a concern. But the biggest picture is that it goes back to the unit, and that an adult, if they have a concern about what a scout is wearing, if it is a safety issue and the scout is in immediate danger, meaning they are going to get hurt by what they're wearing, then you can step in and say, hey, Scout, we need to talk. I think you're doing something that's a little dangerous. And that might be something like wearing flip-flops and running around, right? That would be an immediate safety issue that you could talk to the scout about. If it's not an immediate safety issue, like perhaps you think their swimsuit is not appropriate, whatever that might mean to you, then you do not talk to the scout directly. You go to the scout's leadership and talk about that issue with the scout's leader, because it's not an immediate safety issue. So this helps keep conflict from happening in front of the scout or directly to the scout.
Okay, yes. So I know we're going to get more into that, inter-unit communication in a second here. But, as we're looking at these guidelines, something incredible has been achieved in these. When you're making any kind of guideline for clothing, it's hard not to have some controversy there, or something that people would disagree with. I really challenge everybody to read these. They're very agreeable. No, I don't think anyone's going to be like, no, I want offensive words on my Scout shirts. And I think we all agree, let's leave those off. So I think you all did a really great job. Good job to the work group who put these together. And then it even gives some really important guidelines for creating the policy at the unit level. Sorry, go ahead, Angelique.
Yeah. So the whole crux of this is we are not creating the policy. The unit is creating the policy. We have some general guidelines about what is okay and what is not okay for scouting. And those general guidelines are, the clothing needs to be safe for the activity. It needs to not contain anything that's offensive. And it gives some guidelines around that, some general structure. But the actual clothing policy is done at the unit level. And number one should focus on safety. So you in your troop with your chartering organization create what is appropriate, right, for your unit. What is your clothing policy for your unit? So that may be, here's what we wear for our Scouts BSA, our field uniform. Here's what we wear for our activity uniform. And there's a picture on the screen, and it's fantastic. So it's a 1-page PDF that you fill out with your troop. And it talks about defining what is our field uniform, what is our activity uniform, and when do we wear it. And then it talks about safety and respectful choices and making sure that we are accommodating everyone in our unit with religious, cultural, and medical needs, and then what our aquatics activity policy is. So this is at troop level. You should be printing this off and making sure everyone in your unit knows what your troop clothing policy is. That way, if someone has a question from another troop is concerned, you can refer back to this as an adult and say, here is our troop clothing policy and what we feel is appropriate for our troop. And that's the end of it. It's up to you as the adult leader, what is okay for your troop.
Very good. I just dropped the link to the clothing policy template in the comments. This answered my next question, was how do we go about this? What's so cool about this and the unique opportunity you have in a troop that schools don't do this. They do have this opportunity. They don't do this, but you can really get your scouts buy-in. You might know what the answers that you're going to be putting in these blanks are, but you can be working on this together. Everybody kind of understands, hey, this is why. Right. This is our policy.
So let's give it an example, right? It's really controversial unfortunately, about tucking in the shirt, right? Both boys and girls get that a lot. So tucking in a shirt is a troop level policy. You decide as a troop, your youth, and you and your chartering organization decide whether or not your troop wears your shirt tucked in or untucked. And there are a variety of reasons that people may want to have it untucked or tucked. There is no right or wrong. There is just a choice that is made for that. It is your choice to make that a troop policy. So you would decide as a troop whether or not you are a tucked or untucked troop. And you have it written in your policy. And so if someone comes up to you, they should not be coming up to you. But if an adult goes to a scout or comes to you as a troop leader and you say, tuck your shirt in, you say, here is our policy. Our troop is allowed to wear theirs untucked. And so thank you. This question is done. And this is a reminder, like if the scouts are not from your unit, unless the scout is in immediate danger, you do not talk to them about their clothing.
Okay, that's
it may look different.
So as we're rolling into this, do you have any advice for leaders to give their scouts if they're approached by another unit leader who is giving them, clothing advice?
First of all, we remember the scout law. We are friendly, courteous, and kind, no matter what we are talking about. So that is above all in scouting. We have to do that. We are setting the example for our youth. So we cannot go and have a disagreement that gets ugly in front of our scouts, especially because we are setting the example. So we have a friendly, courteous, and kind discussion about what our concerns are. Then we say, thank you for letting me know. And if there's an actual concern there, then, maybe you go address it. But if there's not, you say, our troops policy is that this is okay. I understand your concern, but this is our troops policy. And my scout is okay with this. And that should be the end of it. If there is still conflict, then you go to the council level and you have a discussion among adults. At no point should you be having this discussion in front of the youth. The whole point of this is to take some of this conflict that's happening, that we are seeing, that especially the girls are getting over and over and over again, is that this conflict is not happening in front of the youth. This is a discussion between adults. And if it doesn't have to do with the scout safety, that should be the end of it.
Fantastic. So we got a little bit into uniform shirts or Class A shirts. Are there any other considerations for units as they're creating their policy related to specific, pieces of clothing?
I mean, so something that's always contentious is swimsuits. It's up to you to decide what's appropriate. Remember, and I use the word appropriate, but what's safe should really be the word that we're using. What's safe for your unit? What accommodates everybody's needs? As a woman, I can tell you that sometimes on some women's tankinis fit better, so that's what they want to wear. It is nobody else's business but your troops. What is okay for your unit? It needs to be safe for the activity. It needs to be able to stay on when you're in the water. It needs to be swimwear, not something that's not swimwear because it could get tangled, or it could, some pools, because of the chlorination, it has to be swimwear. So those are things that that need to be considered when creating your troop policy.
Charlene has a really good question. Charlene, I'm going to get to it in just a second. But before we move on from this, I want to ask you, selfishly, I want to ask about a couple pieces as well, because there's a balance between finding what's appropriate, which we've addressed as subjective, and you want kids, your youth, to want to be there. They're accustomed to wearing certain things. So like things like leggings and shorts and, especially with girls, how does a unit find its policy around those?
Troop decision with your chartered organization, your scouts, and your families. Troop decision.
Beautiful. Yeah.
The scouting uniform. I love my scouting uniform. There is a scouting uniform and we should be wearing it and setting an example. But the details of how we wear our uniform is up to the troop. And if it's not your troop, you should not be commenting on it.
And to that point, again, you emphasize, we're talking about the charter org or your unit, which includes your families. So it isn't all about dressing exactly the way the Scoutmaster dress. It's okay. Let's get some input from the group here for sure.
So,
yes.
Yeah, it's definitely should be a group buy-in, and everyone should be considered about what they're comfortable to wear, and that their accommodations. Like, so we had the scouter who mentioned she was Muslim, so there are certain things that we need to accommodate, and religious beliefs should be accommodated, because in the end, the uniform brings us together. That we all have a uniform on, and it's a leveler, right? And puts everybody on the same page. But at the same time, the uniform is one of 8 methods of scouting, and you cannot require it. So I just want to put that out there since we're talking about uniforms. You can't exclude people for not wearing a uniform, and you need to make religious accommodations, medical accommodations, and some accommodations for personal preferences with the uniform as well.
Very good. Okay, Charlene. Charlene brings us to another whole topic, which is great. Can camps require a specific swimsuit? And let me add on there, how do camps and events factor into this?
Yes, so this is a really important question, and it's a great seg, so I appreciate that she brought it up. So scout camps and large events for scouting can impose additional requirements to the clothing guidelines for the camp or the event. Those those requirements should be based on safety. So it should be something like, perhaps your camp offers horseback riding, so you must wear jeans, perhaps, is something that they put out there. You need to wear jeans for horseback riding. That is a safety issue. So they're adding something as a safety issue. If they add something to the clothing guidelines, then it should be communicated in advance in the guide to all participating units ahead of time, and that those units now understand, those troops understand that, okay, this camp has these additional requirements. We're going to make sure we follow them because they're there for a reason. So those at that point will supersede what the unit level is. If they wanted to require a specific swimsuit, it should be based on safety. So it should have a safety basis behind it. If there are some concerns about conflicting policies between the troop and the camp, then that's a conversation that the troop leader should have with the camp director ahead of time. But in the end, if it's a safety issue, the camp should absolutely default to what is more safe for the event.
Wonderful. So another topic that comes up, we talked about, we talked about resolving conflicts. If there's, one unit thinks one thing for policy, our adults talk to each other if they think somebody is not wearing something safe and they're not in immediate danger. What if there's some kind of unresolved conflict between adults? Because there really should never be an adult-youth conflict.
Right. So in the end, it should be the troop who has the policy, and that should be the answer. And that is why it's important that you have written down what is appropriate, what is your troop's policy on clothing, because that is what it's going to default to. This is the troop's clothing policy, so this is what we're going to follow. If someone will not give it up, then that is the point where you need to go to your council leadership and say, hey, we have a concern. Can you help us interpret the policy? And that would be how you resolve that. But at no point should the scout ever be a part of this discussion. This should be a discussion that's happening among adults, because again, we're seeing scouts, particularly young women in our program, who are being told over and over again this conflicting information. So we want to try and keep that outside of the realm of what the youth are experiencing.
So something that's just clicking for me too is that this policy also is, sharing with your scouts when is the appropriate time to wear a field uniform and when is the appropriate time to be wearing an activity uniform?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. So yes, because there are units who say we always travel in our field uniform, or we always set up camp in our activity uniform. And so that can help make sure everyone's on the same page about when we wear the uniform as well.
So then in a situation, let's say we all roll to camp because we all traveled in our Class A's, or we all traveled in our field uniform, and then others are in their activity uniform. What if that would fall in the same category, right? You don't necessarily go to a youth and say, you're supposed to be wearing your,
correct. If they're not in your unit, it's not your business.
I also think it's safe to assume, well, that's their policy. Yep. No need to even be concerned. I guess there's this other component of this as well, which is educating your youth, right? That they should not be giving youth on youth, unit to unit.
Correct.
Back on.
So correct. Yes, we do see in the comments that sometimes there were youth who were telling other youth that what they were doing was not okay, or what they were wearing was not okay. Again, if it's not your unit, it's not your business, even if you're a scout.
Okay, Erwin's question, I'm reading this live. If it's a contingent whose policy is employed and followed, scouts from multiple units. Okay, so what do we do if we're doing a contingent unit?
This is a great question. Yeah. So a contingent, let's say a jamboree contingent, right? So you have scouts from all different units, but you become a troop. You're a contingent troop. So you, as a contingent, create a policy for your contingent, and you make sure it's based on safety, and you make sure that it accommodates all of the needs of the scouts that are in your contingent. So you would be creating a temporary policy for your contingent.
There you go. And that's fun. And again, you can walk them through that policy together so that they're aware. And I think it'd be totally worth the youth having that, particularly if a contingent, because they might be used to their unit's policy and they just might need a printout or have it on their phone, this one.
Yep.
Again, a reminder you can find at go.scoutingmagazine.org/clothing-guidelines. You can find links to both the guidelines and the policy. We've also put those in the comments as well. Angelique, hopefully you know what I'm talking about here, but why does all of this matter?
This matters because we have the Scout law, right? We need to be friendly, courteous, and kind. And we want to make sure that all of the kids in Scouting are having a good Scouting experience. So this survey uncovered a problem. It uncovered something that maybe we didn't realize was such a big problem. So we can see that Scouts are getting this conflicting information, and they're having not as great an experience because of it. So this is important for everybody, right? So that everybody understands what the procedures are, and everybody is keeping this conflict away from the youth, and that everyone is having an experience where they feel comfortable in it.
Let me throw a curveball question as I'm reading this feedback from the youth from the 5-year survey. What about when a unit leader needs to guide a scout on you're not dressed according to our policy?
So that's when you have the policy. Like, this is why we made it simple. We made it a PDF that you can print out and write in what it is for your unit. And you say you do it privately with the appropriate 2D leadership. You never want to really be criticizing a scout in front of their peers. So you pull them off to the side with 2D leadership, right? And you say, hey, this is our policy. Do you think this meets the policy? Or this is our policy. I have a concern about your safety. Can we talk about this briefly? And hopefully, because the scout had input on creating the policy at the unit level, the scout's going to understand what the issue is.
Okay, Angelique hit every little portion of that, because your gut goes to, some people might think, hey, just call it out. But let's think, like, you can usually let your cooler head prevail and think, okay, no, I need to talk to that youth privately. But then you realize, no, I can't talk to that youth privately. I'm in Scouting. I don't do that. So you might talk to them with their parent. You might talk to them in earshot and visibility of your other unit leader, something like that. But I love that you call out, because we see in that feedback what a lasting impact that made on the young woman of being called out in front of her entire unit.
Other people. It's embarrassing, right? So you don't want to be called out. So that's why in Scouting, and it's not just with clothing policy, but we criticize in private and we compliment in public.
You really are dealing with developing self-esteem, both your young women and your young men. So this is, I don't want to say it's a sensitive area, but it's an important one to try your very best to get right. Do your absolute best at this.
And this is a teaching moment where we're teaching youth how to manage conflict. We're teaching youth how to have these hard conversations. And that's what we do in Scouting, right? So we have to model that ourselves, because they're always watching and they're going to learn from us.
Well, the guidelines have proven to be a big hit with the audience. Tons of viewers, only very kind, supportive comments. Thank you all for keeping that going. Keep the conversation going after we're live today. Okay. Love Christy's question. How often should the unit's uniform policy be revised? I think this is important because we evolve as time goes on.
It should be looked at every year, especially when you have new scouts that are joining your unit. Because if you have new scouts, there might be some needs that you might not be aware of. So we should be looking at it every year when we bring on new scouts.
Yeah, I think like as often as you are checking, maybe not quite as often, but somewhat as often as you're checking how frequently your families like to be communicated with, you might be checking in on, hey, how's our uniform policy doing? Angelique, what have we missed?
I think we've covered most of it. I mean, I think the biggest questions people often have are, what about council activities or camps? And what happens when we have a conflict over it? I think we caught all of it, but the take-home message really is for this, that if it's not your unit, it's not your business unless it's an immediate safety issue. And that's the message I want to make sure everybody hears over and over again. If it's not your unit, it's not your issue unless it's an immediate safety concern. And then the other big take-home message is, remember to be friendly, courteous, and kind when we're talking about this, because this is such a hot button issue, because we have so many differing opinions on it. It's really easy to get caught up in the moment and feel really strongly about it, but we have to be friendly, courteous, and kind in everything that we do, because we're teaching youth how to be friendly and courteous and kind. So we have to know how to do that ourselves.
No one could say it better. Thank you for your time on this, Angelique. Again, thank you to the work group who put this together. Everybody, you can find these guidelines and the troop policy template online. We'll put that URL up at the bottom of the screen right now. Yes, go.magazine.org. Sorry, go.scoutingmagazine.org/clothing-guidelines. Thank you, everybody, again, for the wonderful civility in the comments. Keep the conversation going. Tag somebody who needs to watch this episode. Share it in an email to your parents, your unit, your family, whatever you do, whatever communication vehicle you got going. Angelique, this was great. And we will be back about exactly a month from today with another Troop Talk Live. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye.